Hello, everyone. I am so excited and honored to have one of my sweet friends and mentors on the podcast today, Charlotte Munn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
All right, we're going to kick right into this. And I'd love to hear, what was the catalyst for your spiritual awakening?
It's such a big question. When I first hear it, my thought is I don't register as being spiritually awakened. I see myself more as spiritually refining.
Hmm.
I'm in the process of refining my system so that it will be ready for whatever that experience is. And the stage in my practice where I am in now, I feel like I am enlightening my intellect. That has really been my journey for the last dozen years or so. And even that has such a profound impact on my life. Even just clarifying my thinking and being aware of other ways of thinking and knowing that the practice is beyond thinking. I've certainly had tastes of something that I can't put into words. But when I hear spiritually enlightened, I almost imagine the sorts of practitioners that can come in and out of altered states at will. So I'm definitely not at that level. But I'm preparing my system to someday have whatever experience it's meant to have.
Totally. And I respect your attention to detail so much and always having so much integrity. And so, if we can kind of rephrase that to what kind of started your journey into health and wellness, spiritual world?
I love it. So it's so interesting because I do feel like I'm on a spiritual path. And like many people, it didn't start that way at all. Um, I mean, to answer the original question a different way, what started my spiritual enlightenment? Oh, being born. Getting born did that. Yeah, getting born. Because I was always the kind of person that was seeking. Like I always was an existential seeker from as early as I can remember.
Mm.
Um, and for me, I never really found any answers. And I thought then that the purpose of life was to explore the mystery of the human experience. And I always was looking for the truth of the human experience. And since I wasn't able to find it, I found myself making art. I used to make theater before I got into yoga because it seemed to me a place where we could explore the different values of what it means to be human, and within that, the mystery of it. But I always wished that I was into something else. I've always been the kind of person that's really into one thing. Like I've never wondered ever in my life, what do I want to do with my life or when I grow up? It's always been obvious. It just changed at one point in my life. So I went from seeking, feeling like I couldn't find, and I was just going to make art about not being able to find, to actually finding myself entering yoga thinking it was exercise, and then realizing that the answer that I'd been looking for through art, actually there was an answer that made a lot of sense to me intuitively when I first heard it. As an open-minded skeptic, I was always open-minded to different ways of looking at the world, but there was never something I'd been exposed to before that felt like I'd heard it before at like a deep level. So I originally started my yoga practice thinking it was a form of exercise. I started doing it at my gym. I thought it was a stretching class. And I used to go to the gym and do my little elliptical weightlifting routine and see people coming out of stretching class looking like they felt pretty good. So I was like, oh, I have some tension in my neck. I should probably stretch. I don't know how to do that. There's a class for that free at my gym. So it was really purely physical. And then it moved from that into my form of exercise. So it, was physical for quite a while. But when I did my first teacher training, I was grateful to have leaders in that space that were aware of the depths of this practice. So early on, I was exposed to there being more. And that impacted me, but I left it alone for a while. And then have come back to it, to really looking at the full system after I went through that chapter of really building a deeper relationship with my body, and then realizing that we're not just the body, and taking it from there. So it's been an organic unfolding, I'd say. But that seeking wasn't always easy. Like many people, part of why we seek the meaning of life is because we're struggling with life, right? Like if I think when you're in joy, you're not asking those questions. So I had hard times and have always just been looking for coping skills. I actually did a stint. I was pretty suicidal when I was a teenager and actually spent a week in a mental hospital because I just really wasn't safe around myself. And it's interesting because that questioning about life has sort of stayed with me, but now it's shifted into this thing that I actually use as power. I see it as like, it makes me more connected to spirit. Like that veil feels more thin, where I'm not really afraid of death. I'm almost like excited because I feel like there'll just be more things to explore on that side. So my yoga practice is almost a coping skill for this realm. And where I am now is using it to help enjoy it more, like to really enjoy the play of being here. And I suffer a lot less now. So, you know, it's tools for life, and my life's much happier than it used to be. So even just practically, whatever, if changing the way I think changes my experience of life, worth it.
Totally. I'm so curious, when you were younger, how did you know that, and like looking back now, you probably know like, oh, I was really into existentialism. What were some of those thoughts as a kid that you had that you knew that that was what that was?
Oh, it's a good question. You know, my dad's a scientist. So if I go back a long ways, I'm thinking about just like interest in like space and the stars and trying to figure out where we fit in that, like looking at telescopes as a little kid and not just being like, oh, cool stars and planets, but being like, what does that mean about like what I'm even doing here? Like, how does my experience of eating this banana have anything to do with that thing I saw through the telescope? So I think it was like almost like,
Yeah.
now I see it as cosmic curiosity. Um, I think it was that. I think it was I remember, I just have a memory of like questioning what is the meaning of life really early on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no word to describe that other than source coming through you, and probably so clearly when we're younger, so it's so much easier. What's also so interesting about you is I really relate to you in that sense of always having a really strong sense of identity that I know that not everyone listening and not everyone in the world is supposed to have. Some are meant to kind of morph and be more chameleons. But it's like you're passionate about something and like you're focused on it and you know it. And of course that starts to change. But I find that having that strong sense of identity, when that transition comes, it's very almost tragic because it's like, this is where I feel grounded in, is who my identity is. So I love to hear when you were at your job for, I think, was it 10 plus years? I wasn't really sure. Was it?
Yeah. I worked for the same company for about 12 years. And like 10 years of that was in leadership. It was like a little career. It's a whole chapter.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, how was that transition for you? And how did you know that you had to walk away from that old identity and shed it so you can step into something different?
There were so many reasons that built up upon themselves that gave me the signal that it was time to make a change. And the most full one, like when I really asked my heart, like what was the main instigator to make such a huge change? I started to feel like I was withholding information from my students, and I didn't love that feeling. For a long time, I'd been really passionate about bringing yoga to people that were newer to it, making it accessible, removing the barriers to entry. Because, you know, I used to make fun of people that did yoga before I got into it myself. So I was interested in teaching to people like me when I was new to it. But then after a while, you know, I'm a nerd, so I never stopped being in teacher training myself and deepening my own understanding. But at a certain point, as you advance as a practitioner, there's certain parts of the technology that you wouldn't bring into a class that you want to be accessible for new people, because it can be intimidating. You need to be ready for that, you know, and I think being a good teacher is knowing when your students are ready for what parts of the technique. And so I got to a point where my practice looked nothing like what I was teaching anymore. And the stuff that I was feeling pulled to teach about was, I didn't have a platform to do that anymore at that company. So it was almost out of respect for realizing that not everyone needs to grow like I grow. It's much easier for me to, I don't know, not try to take a giant corporation and try to shape it into what I think it should be, when I can just do that myself in my own little pocket of the world. And I just had gotten to a point in my life where I used to think that more was more, like that my life would be more impactful if I could impact more people. Like quantity of impact used to be really important to me. And that has shifted. I'm no longer interested in quantity of impact. I'm interested in quality of impact, even if it's to less people. And I want those people to be sincere seekers who are interested in going deeper. So it was just a shift in what I wanted to offer and who I wanted to offer it to.
I love that. I think that's so important. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Law of One. It was channeled in the 80s by a sixth dimensional being. And it's a whole system of how we can understand this whole human experience and the astral experience as well. And now I'm kind of like blanking on the name. The name is Ra, who it's a sixth dimensional being who channels the Law of One. And he says his only mission for writing that book and for channeling these pages, I mean, there's 2 volumes of it and it's like 500 pages or so. And his only mission was that I could get to one person. If this could just get to one person, it's this huge book they dedicated like years to doing, then like his mission would be set.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And the more I align with the idea that the other person is you and you are the other person, because we're all just, right, the boundaries are an illusion, the more I realize that one person could even be myself.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear more on the school that you have created out of this, now leaving that job. And what is your mission? And how did Spirit communicate this through you?
My mission right now is to be a sadhaka, to be a practitioner. There were times in my yoga career where teaching felt like a practice to me. It would fill my heart. But I also know you can't give what you don't have. So if I am wanting to help people refine their practice and their life, I need to be doing that myself as my top priority. So in a way, when I think about my business, my practice is the top priority and my education, because that is the only way that I can make sure the quality is what I'm giving and that what I'm giving is authentic. So I almost see the business as then my offering back. I was born in this body with a verbal skill, like talking. I talk really young, talking just comes easily to me. So I might as well use that to explain some of the things that I come to learn from my own practice so that more people can understand them. And then also, we have to pay for things. So then there's an energy exchange that comes from that. And that allows me to commit my life back to yoga. So it almost becomes like this cyclical thing. My practice and then giving the practice back, and then the exchange that happens from that provides me the life to be able to really commit my life to the practice. So I have to say that out loud because it's so easy with my Pitta nature to get focused on what I'm doing with the business. So I have to stay really clear about that, because I'll easily find myself running 5 trainings, 10 workshops, 20 private clients, and then realize that I haven't done my own practice in 2 months. Like that would be so like how I've been in the past. And I'm really committed to having shifted that and maintaining it. So I've had to get really clear about what I'm offering, because I can't do all of it. So the mission for this little business, actually, I never really thought about it. And when you ask the question, where did it come from? How was it communicated to me? It was the most obvious organic thing that's ever happened in my life. I knew I wanted to do it, but my plan was to do it a little later, was to sort of catch my breath, reconnect with my practice. I already had a bunch of notes in my phone, you know what I mean, about like things that I wanted to offer. I already had an outline for a 300-hour. And when those notes were made, it was a thought that comes to me verbally. And then I'm like, that's perfect. The way that just showed up in my brain, that makes perfect sense to me. Let me just write that down. So it's pretty organic. And then, when I got laid off from my little part-time job I was doing for money, sort of catching my breath period, I knew it was time. So I just opened up those notes on my phone and got laid off on Friday, launched on Monday. And it sort of organically unfolded since then. It became obvious it was time to launch the training. I sat down, I wrote the training. That wasn't an easy process necessarily, but again, I didn't force myself to stick to any schedule of how I did it. I just sort of let it come out. Some days I wouldn't work on it at all because I wasn't feeling inspired. Other days I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and spend 12 hours on my computer banging it out. And so I felt like there was a process that was like half a year of the creation, and making contact with my community in a new space, really understanding what it was like to connect in a virtual space, which I'm so grateful for that. Never imagined that it would happen. And now I'm so comfortable there and so grateful for it because my students are all over. So it's wonderful.
Totally.
And this year has been a chapter of execution. So executing the training, it's 11 months long. So once we get started, it's sort of focusing on that. And in between, working one-on-one with people, which is something I've always wanted to do. And when I would sit around and think about how to make it happen, I just could never figure out how to make it happen. The way to make it happen is it happens to you. None of these people are people I've gone out and been like, hi, do you want to do a private lesson with me? These are like, these people are people that I love and know. And when we're meant to work together, it happens. So then I offer one public class a week, which is really just a space for me to experiment with practices and putting them together. And it's a space for people to come check out what I'm about if they are new to me, and before they invest in a big training or a one-on-one session or something like that. I am here to be a bridge for people who have a foundation in yoga, specifically yoga asana or yoga postures, which is where so many people start, who are curious and sincere about wanting to know more. So I'm not a yoga expert. I'm not a guru or anything like that. But I am someone that can help be a bridge between what you think yoga is and what yoga is. And I see it as exposing people to more of the ingredients of yoga. And then they can pick which ingredients they want more of as they make the flavor exactly the kind of yoga that they need for their constitution and their selves. So I've always felt like I'm the sort of person that if someone, of course I want students in my life and I love building relationships with students, but if they stay with me forever, I haven't done my job. Like my job is to see people through a certain period of their practice. It used to be the beginning of their practice. And now it's like the middle. I see it as like the next step, like people that have been teachers for a while, but just teaching a bunch of power vinyasa who are like, I know there's more, I just don't know what it is. And like, how do I even know what yoga is without like high to low plank or without like salutations, like just understanding it in a greater context. So I just sort of see my role as a explainer of more complex things to help bridge that gap for people so that they can find whoever their next yoga expert that they want to study under is.
I love your mission so much because it comes with detachment and surrender of taking your ego out of it, that, oh, I'm trying to help people, or like, oh, I want to change people in this way, because truly we can only be responsible for ourselves. So for you rooting in, if my vibration is high, if I'm in alignment, then I know that I will be inspiring enough. Then that's it. That's all that needs to be done. The offerings are the extension. It's the equal energy exchange, but it really comes from living in your own vibration. And like, that is such a perfect, tangible example for our community to see when you are living in alignment, how easeful life can really be, that it just comes to you. You knew right away, instead of saying, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. Why did I get laid off? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, must be time. Move on to the next thing. And then immediately doors open after that. And it's just really seeing every quote unquote adversity as an opportunity, and how the universe is always trying to work for you, not against you. I think that like message is so clear, and I'm so happy for you that like you're living in this alignment, ease, and grace period now, because that's how we're all meant to live.
Totally. And you know, I'm present with what our teacher says, which is life doesn't happen to us, and at a certain period it happens for us, but I'm really working on that next level, which is just letting life happen through me. Which just allows me to sit back and have more ease in my life, which is what I need anyway. Yeah, because you know why? Being who I am, it would be so easy for me to fake it, and I know I could. So if I didn't prioritize really rooting myself in what I want to deliver, I could easily, I mean, I went to theater school, you know what I mean? Like I could easily put on the show of what I think would be a successful business. But then I would like throw up in my own mouth on a daily basis. So, you know, I'm just trying to stay humble and practice.
Totally. I mean, you are truth itself. Like there's one person that's like truth and integrity, it's you. So I love that that's literally rooted, infused, just embodied in your mission. And I'd love to hear what are some of the moments that you've had, because you mentioned I didn't think I would ever do anything virtually, and I totally agree. It's so cool to get people from all over the world and connecting together. It's like, whoa. And what are some moments that you've connected with your students that have affirmed the mission that you've created?
Well, you know, I am still a human being with an ego. So the clearest answer to that is when I'm able to help someone. We have a joke in my household that my favorite title for any job is super helper. Like, what's your title? Oh, I'm a super helper. So I really like when I'm able to help. I know when I help someone because you can see it happen for them. And what I have learned to love about Zoom is you can still tell. You can still tell. You can still read people's energy. In fact, I don't think virtual is better than in person. I don't think in person is better than virtual. I think they're different and they have different pros and cons. Being in person is valuable because you are live in the flesh. The energy is more palpable. You can see people in 3D. You can touch each other, all the things we know. The things that you get virtually there's an intimacy in being closer to people's faces. So even in a group setting, I'm thinking about these 26 beautiful souls I have in the 300-hour we're running on Zoom right now. These people are deep in my heart, and I feel like I know them because when we are all together in a group of 26, if we were in person, the distance between me and their eyeballs is further as we sit in a circle together than it is when we have committed a sacred space in our own homes and committed to being together for 3 days on Zoom, and we're in our little Brady Bunch squares, like sharing, and you can still see it. And you can almost, as someone that like really likes to read bodies for all reasons, like physically, anatomically, emotionally, spiritually, you can still do that through the computer in a really intimate way. And you're in people's homes with them often, which there's an intimacy in that I've certainly felt in my own vulnerability of not necessarily having the most beautiful home to present. So I've had to get over that in terms of like really being authentic and like, this is actually the space I live in, and welcome to my professional setting where my couch and my cats are behind me. Like that's part of it, but also seeing into people's homes and, you know, bringing the practice into a space where they have family and pets and responsibilities and noises. I think there's an integrative quality of not having a studio that's separate from your life. So I think there have been these really cool things that I've seen happen. I try not to measure my success too much because it's really easy for me to get overly measuring and not just feel. So I just try to feel it when I'm looking at people's faces, how they're receiving things. All of my teaching is interactive, so I get to physically hear with my own earballs stuff that they're saying about how it's helpful and changing the way that they're moving through their lives. So, you know, the egoic part of me really likes to hear from my students when things are working, because that's those are affirmative that I'm headed in the right direction.
I love that. And although we talked about seeing how every adversary can be an opportunity, there are those moments where we see an adversary, it kind of like, I feel like it almost catches you off guard. And that's why it's like, oh, why is this so challenging? And we just kind of forget for a moment. And I'd love to hear what have been those moments for you where it's been challenging while building your own yoga school. And something that kind of came to mind when you were saying, I don't measure anything, I was like, whoa, that's huge. Because coming from a corporation that used to measure everything and that's so ingrained in you, I'm sure that took some deconditioning. So if there was any challenge letting go of that, and then any other challenges that come to mind.
Yeah. And, you know, to be clear, there are some things that I measure, like obviously I do bookkeeping and stuff, like I manage the money that's coming in, mainly so that I don't cry when I do my taxes next year, like I did when I did them for the first time this year. As a first-time business owner, when I hadn't done that well and then had to go back and do all my own bookkeeping after the fact. So I'm organized, and I'm grateful for that, because that comes from my years of working in corporate America. Like there's certain things I just learned about that are second nature to me. So I'm grateful for the education that I got in that time. So now I even forget what the question was. Oh, other challenges. Yeah. So honestly, the biggest challenge has been not doing more. because I come from a culture that says more is better.
Totally.
So the hardest part is to not try to grow my business. That's not my aim. That's not the kind of life that I want to live right now. That might change at some point. But it's so easy for me to, especially with things reopening right now, to say, to feel this quality that I'm supposed to be doing more, that I'm supposed to also be offering a 200-hour, that I should also be teaching more public classes a week. I could do all of those and make more money. On paper, that would be great, says American capitalism. When I actually look at how I want to spend my days, what is it like? When I wake up in the morning, what do I do first, second, and after that, and after that? What does the day look like? I want how I want my days to feel and look like to be the way that I choose how I run my business. So that means that more is not necessarily better for me right now in this stage of my life. So the hardest part for me is to lean away from my fear of judgment, of people wondering why I'm not doing more, or thinking that I'm being lazy, which is like a giant thing I get to work with in this lifetime, of like fear of being perceived as lazy, which just comes from childhood. I'm getting over that. So yeah, really, really like being okay. I know this is so weird, but I'm the kind of person that coaches myself to be more mediocre, because even when I do that, I execute a lot of things. I still get a lot done. So the idea that less can be more. Quality over quantity.
It's so funny that you already talked about yourself being a Pitta, because we talk a lot about what limiting beliefs are per each dosha. And if I were to really boil down all the ones that a Pitta can have, it comes from I am not enough. It's always that, and like searching for more and more. And yeah, I vibe with that so well too. There's so many times you're like, okay, I should be doing more. I should be doing more work, especially like in the entrepreneur world. I think you're just constantly like, well, I'm the one who's in control here. And it's really constantly like in coming back to the intention of in your sankalpa every day of like, okay, no, what is my truth? How can I do this from integrity? Because when, if not, you would get out of alignment and then things wouldn't flow with ease and grace anymore. And then you're just outsourcing your energy to things and you miss the boat and you lose yourself. So even though you say to yourself mediocre, it's really you just pulling yourself in to be like the best you can be. But that's good. I might use that too.
You totally got it, because what it is a mind trick. Like I'm playing with my own mind and tricking myself into the behavior that I know is most supportive for me.
Totally.
Because it would be like me to think I am not enough to get rid of that feeling I'm going to do more, because the lack of enough means I need more for enough. So more. But that doesn't work. That doesn't work, because what that actually does is take you further external, because when you're doing more, it's more external doing. So now when I have those feelings of I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, I know what I actually need is to do less. I actually need to be in silence. I need to go, like, I need to actually be balancing that with the opposite. And it's funny you say the word enough, because I even work with that from a financial standpoint around this as a business owner, because as someone that cares about equity and has strong feelings about the unfairness that you see around the world, about the way that the enoughness of the world is distributed, I really am interested in, from a business standpoint, only taking what's enough for me.
Wow.
Like, what would it be like? It's scary, but what would it be like to have enough, but to not feel like I needed a lot more than that?
Totally. I think that,
again, all of this might change. Like I reserve the right to change always. So, we'll see what happens, but it's only the second year of me doing this. So that's where I'm at now. And you're right. I've actually the hard part has been encountering the fact that I've been doing this to myself, the part that's been imbalancing over the years. When you're working for other people, you can point your finger at outside things as the cause, but I have to do this. It's my job. I'm this busy. I haven't taken a day off in weeks because of this external thing. And now I get to realize that it's me.
Totally.
I'm the only one doing it to myself. So I get to being your own boss is illuminating in that way.
Absolutely. I know I asked you this a while ago. I don't know if you ever pulled up the chart, but we'll do it after because I'm so curious to know what human design type you are. I'll look.
Can't remember. It was two of them. I can't remember. Manifesting generator is what I think.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So manifesting generators, they are an energy type, but they have the least amount of energy out of the energy type. So they can burn out because of that, because they like to work on all the things. So they're kind of like, yeah, jack of all trades. They like to do it all. And I know that so well because one of my partner, Rachel, she's an MG as well. But that makes so much sense for you because you have so much of that like energy. But you can manifest things really quickly. You can speak them into existence when they're in alignment, of course, and when you're in alignment.
Yep. And I can burn myself out. So I have to be really careful about that. Like, because I have so much energy, and especially if I'm doing my thing and I'm sort of in a flow state and I'm not even aware of what I'm doing, the amount of energy that comes out, I don't even realize it till afterwards. So I'm so grateful now to have more of an understanding of myself and the way my energy flows. And I found that I'm actually just much more of an introvert than I ever gave myself the ability to be before. And I'm really grateful for the last year for allowing me to feel what it feels like to really have more time alone. And as happy as I am to see people. For example, I love you very much, right? And we live pretty close by. And part of why we don't see each other more is because when I'm not with my students, I'm usually by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So valid. I think that's so important too because boundaries is so important for MGs as well. And like you have to build your own boundaries, especially having your own business. So you're like, okay, literally I have to stop. Even though I'm like so excited to do this thing that I'm doing right now, like foaming at the mouth, like I gotta cut it off.
Like, save some for tomorrow. You'll be excited about it tomorrow. And what a blessing. Like, what a blessing to be like, to have the opportunity for growth in my life, to be turn down my stoke meter slightly so that I can like get a good night's sleep. Like, those are the things I get to work on because I get so jazzed about the things that I'm doing with my time.
Totally. You have so many certifications and it's so funny. You're like, I'm a nerd. I'm like, yeah, I totally vibe with that too because I'm constantly like, okay, what I'm going to learn next and what's the next thing? And like, I love looking to see what you do because I'm like, okay, there's another person out there who's like totally going after all the things. And one of those things that I've been so interested to talk to you about was thinking, body, feeling, mind. I know you got your certification, and I love to hear more about this method and how it's transformed you as a yogi.
Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And people don't know about it. And I just really think it's time for that to start changing. I think it's the chapter for this technique to be more well known. So I found the thinking body, the feeling mind, because a friend of mine was in the Loyola Marymount yoga therapy program. And one of the lecturers for the shoulder girdle section is this amazing woman named Dr. Linda Lack. Dr. Linda Lack made an impression on this friend of mine who knew that I had suffered from shoulder girdle problems, wrist problems, shoulder problems for a long time as a power vinyasa practitioner. And she said, you know, this very wild and wonderful woman came into my training and I think you guys should connect. So I'm so glad for that connection. I found her originally to help me rehab wrist and shoulder things. It's a movement healing modality, I could call it, introspective movement meditation. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, which is why it's so important to my life. Linda Lack comes from the modern dance world. She's been developing this technique over the last 50 or 60 years.
Wow.
What she saw were these people that loved to move, breaking down their bodies. And she didn't understand why people that had a love of movement wouldn't want to sustain their bodies so that they could be moving with ease and grace and joy for their whole lives. And as someone that had a love of movement, she just designed this technique herself. Wow. And it's hard to explain, which is, I think, part of why it's not well known, because it doesn't look like anything I've seen before. Some people liken it to things, you know, like elements of Feldenkrais. There's parts that are like that, but there's stuff in there that I've really never seen before. A lot of circular movements. You practice on these big circular mats. You can do it anywhere, though. You can just do it on the floor. So it uses the body in a very like primordial way, I could say. Like when you do it, there's something about it that like reminds me of what it must have been like to be like an amoeba who was evolving from being in the water out on land, and then all of a sudden we sprouted limbs. Like, that's what it feels like to be in the practice. And it's incredibly diverse. It's vast. Like, the technology from the technique is so vast that it almost feels like folklore. Like, there's these bushel baskets full of technique. If you go take a class with Linda, you'll see like a 90-minute movement experience. We may or may not stand up. A lot of it happens on the floor. That being said, it all prepares you for like really high level stuff. There's people there in their 70s that are standing on their heads without their hands and things like that.
Wow.
And there's people there that are in wheelchairs. So the adaptability of the practice and the vastness of it draws me to it. And I actually just can't live in my body without it. Like, without it, I would have this huge gap in my ability to care for myself. So what is it? It's a contemplative movement self-inquiry. It teaches you to feel, if you even just look at the title, the thinking body, the feeling mind. So you shift from thinking about moving the body to almost letting the sensations of the body teach you about yourself. Many years ago, I remember being in some like Ayurveda workshop or something, and they were having us journal on like different things we had in our lives. I can't remember what the exercise was now, but I became aware at that time about the fact that without this technique in my life, I would be way more vata deranged than I am, because it's one of the most grounding things that I have in my life that I look forward to, because it just feels good.
Totally.
When I first found it, part of like in my 300 hour that I run, we do 25 hours of it. And I just, because it's so vast, I just focus on one element of it. The element that I focus on that I think is really missing from other techniques is the art of releasing the body, letting go of the body. So often we think of the body as muscles stretch and muscles strengthen. Yeah, muscles also need to be able to be off duty. And I think an example of this is, you think about if you wake up in the morning with tension, like I used to be a jaw clencher, or I'd wake up in the morning and have like nail marks in my hand from like making a fist while I was sleeping. So even when we're asleep, our muscles don't necessarily go off duty. So we have to train our muscles to let go. And if you have some sort of body opportunity, meaning there's something in your body that's not optimal, before you try to do a bunch of movement patterns to quote unquote fix it, first you have to turn it off, so that then you can use the right muscle fibers for the right task. Because if you have a compensation problem, I think about like, I think physical therapy is fantastic. I'm all about all different kinds of healing. So I'll say that first. And I think about going to physical therapy when I had shoulder problems before I found the thinking body, feeling mind. And they would give me these exercises to do, but I could feel when I did the exercises that I was utilizing muscles in my neck that I ought not to be using for that particular movement. Like, I knew that enough as a mover. But what I would hear was like, your alignment looks great. Like, awesome, do 8 more reps. And while I was doing it, I was like, this is great, but it might look really great. Everything's lined up visually, but internally I'm recruiting the wrong muscles to make this happen. So it wasn't until I found TBFM and actually learned through the practice and the consistency of the practice about turning things off. When I'm able to turn things off properly, which takes time to learn,
Totally.
then I'm able to actually recruit the right fibers in the right way. So with so much of my practice these days being mental and spiritual, my TBFM practice is like my most favorite movement modality right now in terms of my private practice that I'm doing for myself. And then I do a lot of work in my private one-on-one sessions with people. Like, I work with people that are high-level movers that are looking to be more high level. My core has never been so strong since I found this technique, in like the most sneaky ways. So I work with like high-level movers, but I also work with people that are where I'm more part of their healing team. I have a student who was in a terrible accident where he was hit by a truck last year. And this technique has been such an amazing gift to him in just like the micro movements and the way it teaches you to build that inner relationship with your body. I could talk about it all day long, but I feel like I should stop now and see if you have anything to say.
It's so fascinating, because I think all the time of how trauma and emotions are all stored in our body, and we're always saying feel to release it. And I think a lot of people who have like these physical injuries or something like traumatic happens to the physical body, and what is the way to release it? Like, is it a yoga class where everyone's doing the same posture and no one really knows? Like, there's just no way that every person in this room in these postures all the time is like going to release that same trauma or that emotion. We're too different, we're too diverse. So I love that aspect of it because it's deconditioning so much so that you are strictly following intuition and getting that back to being your golden compass, so that again, that's one of those practices that it's probably a practice for life, because you don't have to outsource, you don't have to rely on your teacher anymore, because now you are literally the teacher. It's your own body. So I'm curious to hear, how does she guide that in a classroom setting if it seems like it's so personalized for each person?
So great. So it's about getting out of the body's way. So these movement patterns are about getting out of the body's way so the body can heal itself. So in a group setting, there's certain stuff that works for everyone. And she's also the best body reader I've ever seen. So even if you're on Zoom, because she's on Zoom now too, like she's gonna be watching you and giving you attention. So the group classes are basically for people to practice, and basically very similarly what the sequence will be depending on which day you go. So you can basically be like, ooh, I know that hip sequence on Wednesday is really what I need today. I'm gonna like hit that class or whatever. So what that is basically guided exploration, where she talks you through the movement patterns and then uses language to draw you inward, which is different. If you were to work one-on-one with her, it would be almost more like working with a physical therapist, where she'd be giving you specific exercises. And I do both depending on who I'm working with. So some people like it more of a class that flows, that's personalized to them, and other people it is more like exercises, like, okay, now stand up, we're going to do this neck exercise or whatever. So it almost has this group movement experience, almost like a meditative dance class. And then but when I say dance class, I never want people to think they need to be too coordinated to try it, so don't be scared by that. I don't come from a dance background either. Or it's more therapeutic. Like movement therapy is what it's called. It's not yoga enough to be yoga therapy, according to the people that accredit. But she lectures at yoga therapy schools, obviously. So yeah. Movement therapy, quote unquote, is the stamp.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And probably what you mean by dance is just like that freedom movement kind of. There's no structure to it. It's very guided by your intuition.
It is guided by your intuition, but I don't want to, it also is very much about organization. So there is a level of precision around that, because the belief is that there's something very soothing, like that it's such a kindness for the body to organize itself.
I love that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You should come with me sometime.
I'm going to. I'm like so interested.
You'll love it.
I can't wait. I love my final question. Where do you see the future of yoga and your vision for keeping this ancient wisdom alive, rooted in your intention of integrity?
I'm grateful to have found Sattva Yoga Academy and Anand Malhotra, who I know is one of your teachers also, because since studying with him, I'm less stressed out about the future of yoga. The way he describes it that really resonates with me is yoga has been relevant always, will always be relevant, and that it will adapt for the time that it's needed. So I really believe that. That feels really right to me. Where I feel my responsibility is to continue to be that bridge, so that I have to be careful with myself here. My instinct is to say, so that the least amount of people as possible think that yoga is just exercise, but then I have to coach myself away from the quantity thing again. So like, I want to like almost change my answer in my own head and be like, I want at least 1 or 2 or 10 more people. I want the people that come through my path to realize that there's more, and have that be a source of joy and relief for them. What's the future of yoga? I think it's going to continue to change and adapt. Just what's happened in the 12 years that I've been committed to yoga, it's changed so much, and I think it will continue to. I think there's and maybe it's just because that's where I've been, but I see a resurgence in interest about some of the more traditional practices. And I think being able to take the traditional practices and also create a space where people can create a personal culture of spirituality that's private to themselves is really where I see the future going. We need more connection to the feeling and experience and knowledge that we are all connected, because that is just a deep relief. And when you walk around with that experience in your heart, everything just feels lighter. So we need more of that. And the way to do that is to take what's worked for thousands of years. Don't mess with it. It's like baking. Don't mess with it. We know it works. And take the practices and allow the experience that you have that's private inside yourself to bring you to an understanding that you don't even need to talk about necessarily or write about. You can if you want, but to have that be personal. So I used to be an atheist. So my understanding of spirit now is deeply personal to me. And I have found it through the technique of traditional yoga practices. So I don't consider myself a Hindu necessarily. I don't think that would be accurate or fair. But I absolutely have a spirituality that is based from a yoga Vedantic tradition that comes from, the Hindu umbrella. And I'm just so grateful for the knowledge of Southeast Asia and the fact that I have had access to that information in my own Western life. So trying to figure out how they can fit together. And then I'm sure the future of yoga will have a bunch of shenanigans, like a bunch of shenanigans also. And I'm just going to try not to worry about that too much and just take care of my side of the street.
Absolutely. Lately, I've been saying, not my karma, and that's been really helpful. That's a beautiful intention. And just the final note, where can our audience work with you, find you? What upcoming programs, maybe teacher trainings do you have?
Thanks for asking. I love yoga so much. If people are interested to practice with me, I teach a class on Tuesday afternoons on Zoom. I have a simple little website. It's charlottesyogaschool.com. I feel weird about having my name in the title, but it also helps me make sure that I'm not trying to build something big. It's just me teaching what I know, what I practice. So charlottesyogaschool.com. And you can catch me on Zoom on Tuesdays. That's the group class. If you want one-on-one stuff, I do that. And then we just opened up enrollment actually today for next year's session of 300-hour teacher training. So if you're interested in what that program looks like, it's quite an adventure. I'm stoked about it. So the next session starts in March. Seems far away, but it will be here before we know it. And when we're planning for an 11th-month program, it's nice to know what your life will look like so you can plan your life around it. So if anyone's interested in any of that, I'm so here for it. And I have to also plug Dr. Linda Lack of the Thinking Body Feeling Mind. It would be uncool of me not to. She's so wonderful, and going to the source is always the way, in my opinion. So whether it's with yoga or with TBFM, check her out. She's lindalack.com. And I just look forward to meeting more sincere seekers, if there's any out there that think that I could be of service.
Awesome. We'll have all of those linked in the show notes. And you're just beyond a breath of fresh air. It's so great to talk with you and get deep with you. So thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, let's do more. All right, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.